friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works Workshop. Today in the shop we have an American classic. You've heard of Les Paul? Well, here's one of those instruments. Obviously Les Paul was a famous guitar player and innovator on the design of the guitar, and this was his design, I guess you'd say, that he agreed with Gibson to produce, and they've produced this. This is a nice guitar. It's got some issues. There's a note in here from the customer that the switch tip did not come included in the shipment. I will tell you that the customer had taped this on here with the blue masking tape, but it had fallen off and was laying down in here, and so that might have scratched the top. I don't see any particular scratches, so maybe we got lucky with that. So maybe that would be a point to think about if you're shipping me one of these kind of instruments with something that can come loose like this big heavy part, and just put it inside the box here in your case rather than leaving it on the instrument. Okay, well, I think we dodged a bullet there anyway. It doesn't look like there's any scratches, or at least I don't see any. I don't really see anything wrong there. Might be a little bit of rubbing right there and there, but that may be from something else. But that's about where it was laying, and it's about that length, so maybe that's what that was from. Anyway, bottom line is, the real reason this thing is in the shop is because of that. Let's take a look at that and see what that looks like. Doesn't look good, I can tell you that. Looks like we got another case where the truss rod cover is the only thing holding it together. That's what it looks like. There you see it. Bad shape. But it broke in such a way that I think we can glue it right back and you'll barely be able to even tell it. So I'm not too worried about this one. I think we can fix that pretty easily. Well, the first thing we're going to do is get rid of some of the hardware here because it does interfere with where the break is, even up to this first set of tuning keys. I'm not really sure which to take off first, but we'll leave the truss rod cover till last, I guess. In this case, we're going to go ahead and take off this bottom set of keys. It's got the old Kluson Deluxe on here. This is a very good shape guitar. I don't know what year it is. I don't think it's real old based on the looks. There's a serial number on the back of the peg head here. I'll try to zoom in and let you take a look at that, and then you can look it up if you want to. Maybe you can see the serial number there. It looks like 0289337, and the last number is not very clear, but it looks like it's a 6. At first glance it looks like a 0, but I believe it's a 6. So one more time, that's 0289337 6, I believe. I'd like to get these buttons out of there too. This is actually proving to be kind of hard to get these buttons out. I've got my center punch set here, and I've got one that fits down to that bushing really well. The problem is, you know, it's all broke across here, so I don't really want to push on it real hard. I'm afraid I'll break something, but it's very tight, unfortunately, and I would really like to get them out of there because they seem to cross right through where it's broke. So I need to get them out of there, and they really don't want to come. I'm gonna hold it by hand here and just tap it a little bit first before I go to anything elaborate and see if that'll knock them loose. I think that's doing it. Actually, I think that may be doing it. Using my hand to hold it there and support it. That did knock it loose. They're really tight, and I think that they might even be pinched because of the crack going across there. It looks good. I don't see any real problems in the truss rod area. The crack went under that. You know, these mahogany necks, mahogany, you know, people think of it as a hardwood, but honestly, mahogany is about the softest hardwood there is, at least in my opinion. I'm sure there are softer hardwoods out there, but it's one of the softer hardwoods, let's just say it that way. And it has very distinct grain lines and things, and it can break very easily. Apparently this probably fell and the shock of it just cracked it right across there, especially with the strings on there, the string pressure. But I think we're looking real good. I'm a little hesitant to push this down to make sure it's going to match up, but I think it will. Yeah, it does. So I'm just going to get glue in there before we have any further damage to this. I'm really going to make sure we get glue down in there really well. We're going to get my clamps ready, get some pads and everything ready, and then we'll be right back. I've got all my clamps laid out. I've got everything close by here that I think I'm going to need, at least right at the moment. I probably could have got me a couple of towelettes ready to wipe up the extra squeeze out. I've got the guitar up-ended with my left hand, and so that gravity will help me get the glue down in here. This is such a big crack, I can just pour glue down in here, as you can see. That's probably way more than I'll ever need, but I figure more is better than not enough in this case. I'm going to use the brush to get it way down in there. You can buy, you know, brushes like these artist brushes that have real skinny ferrules on the end down there, and that's what I needed to get way down in there. And it looks like it's going way down in there. I don't think I've got a problem here. Coverage is good. I know I've got way more glue in there than I'll ever use. What I'm going to do now is work this back and forth a few times. That'll pump the glue down in there pretty far. If this was a tight crack, I would have wet it first, but because it's not a tight crack, there's not much point in wetting it. Although I probably could have benefited down in this area here by wetting it down a little bit. It's getting hard on my left hand because of the arthritis to hold this up like this, but you know, 10 years ago that wouldn't have been a problem. I could have just held it right there, no problem. But it is hard to hold it here now. Looks really good. I don't think it's going to be a problem at all. What I'm trying to do, I had a big clamp in this area, but I'm trying to get more clamps. To me, you know, lots of clamps in many places is better than one big clamp in one place. It really pushes the stress on the wood in more places, and it spreads the glue out better and tightens up the crack better. So I'm sure that that's going to push more glue out there than by just that one clamp in the middle. I'll put the clamp back in the middle here in a minute, but I'm trying to, you know, get as many clamps in as many places as I can first. Basically, we started up here and worked our way back to get the glue to work out of the crack as much as possible. I think we just about got her whipped. You can see there's quite a bit of glue coming out of this joint over here now, and we'll clean all that up. I'm going to go rinse my rags and wipe it up one more time. I think we're good. There you go. I think that's all clamped up real well. I adjusted a couple of the clamps a little bit more to get them out towards the major parts of the brake where they'll squeeze it together better. I think that's really good. I think that's going to be 100%. I don't think it'll break at that spot again. I think that that spot is stronger than the original. So we're going to let that set 24 hours, and we'll move on from there. One of the notes from the customer in the letter said that the switch tip here was missing. It did not come in the shipment. He said, you know, I know that this is normally a white plastic tip there. You know, these Les Pauls have these gold colored buttons. So why not put a gold color switch tip on this? So I've got this brass rod here, and I think I'm going to make the switch tip out of this brass rod. I do have Delrin plastic, some white plastic, but it's very white. I don't think it really matches anyway. So, I mean, I could make it out of that, but why not? Why not just make it out of brass? And I think that'll look really cool. I think the customer will like it. We're on the metal lathe. I have the brass rod stuck through the head here, and it's just a little bit exposed because you don't want very much stick out, or otherwise there's too much flex in it. I'm going to just face off the end of it, make sure it's perfectly flat. The next thing we're going to do is drill a hole suitable for tapping it with 832 thread. I have a real tiny little center drill in there. It's the only one I can find at the moment for some reason. We're going to just put a little tiny mark in the end of that just so that the drill bit will have a good starting center point. And now we'll change out to the actual bit. It's a number 29. I call them machinist bits because that's the only way I know that they're used, but I don't know. I'm sure there's a better term and somebody will correct me. But anyway, it's a number 29 drill bit. And now we're just going to drill in. I'm going to drill into about a little more than a 1/4 inch, about 5/16 inch depth. Alright, I believe that's going to do for the depth. We're going to put about a 15-degree bevel on this knob. This, of course, will be the end that goes into the screw, but we're going to put about a 15-degree bevel on the knob so that it'll get bigger up towards the top. And I've got the cross slide set here to 15 degrees so I can go in and out with 15 degrees. So here we go. It might be that 15 is going to be too much. I'm going to take it down to 10. I'm just guessing on the bevel, but just looking at the beginning of that, I think that's more bevel than I'm wanting to have on it. So I'm going to turn the bevel down to only 10 degrees, which I guess is a 20 degree, all included. But anyway, we'll try that again. I think I've still got too much stick out there, so I'm going to push the rod in a little bit more before I go too much further. That'll make the rod much more stiff and make my beveling a little bit better, I hope. I think you can see how it's starting to bevel out. I'm going to measure this end and measure the end of the little switch to make sure that we get this about the same size. I measured the end of the switch. It was around 220, so I'm going to measure this down to see what it is. This is about 275, so we can take off quite a I believe we're going to call that good. What we're going to do now is take a file and some sandpaper and clean this up, and then we'll figure out a place to cut it off there. Of course, you have to be very careful using a file close to something spinning, so you really got to have your wits about you, pay attention to what you're doing. Alright, I'm going to stick out just a little bit more so I can work on that a little bit further up there, but then we're going to cut it off. I cut it pretty far deep into it there, and now I'm going to take the file and try to round it off. Yeah, I like the looks of that. Now we'll get some real fine sandpaper and sand it down. Ideally, I'd speed the lathe up for this, but it's quite a process to change the speed on this lathe, so I'm not going to bother with it. I'm just going to sand it like it is. Alright, lastly, before I cut it off the rest of the way, I'm going to try to thread that. I almost made a mistake of cutting it off too soon. Threading on this has to be done manually. This lathe just is not efficient enough to try to do it mechanically. Plus, this is so small it would break something anyway. I'm just sliding this up here. You have to keep your tail piece loose so that it will go in with the thread. So the tail piece is not locked down. And I just start the threading that way, and this makes sure that your threads are absolutely straight to the center of the button. That's looking pretty good. Try it one more time here. Pull the threads on in a little ways, and then I think I'll just disconnect the tail stock from it entirely and go by hand the rest of the way. I get a better feel for it. This way you can break something very easily. I like doing it by hand. You can just feel it, and then you know if you're putting too much pressure on it. That's probably deep enough, but if it's not, we'll modify a tap and go in deeper so that we don't have it bottoming out. I'm going to go ahead and cut that off the rest of the way at this point and do the rest of the work by hand at the workbench. It's hard to level this one, and it's not perfectly level, so it's not cutting it off very well. I'm going to go ahead and saw that off the rest of the way by hand. Well, we're back from the dark side, and let's focus in here and see what this knob's going to do. I haven't tried it on there yet. Let's see if it goes on. Yep. Perfect fit, and it's getting a little tight there. It loosened back up, but it's getting tight again. It's not going down quite all the way, almost though. Well, that's looking pretty good. What do you think? And we just need to clean up the end here. That's pretty nice. Might have to modify a tap and let it tap in there just a little bit more. This may be just a hair longer than the amount of threads that I have in there. But before we do that, let's clean up the very end there where I had to saw it off by hand. You can probably see, if it'll focus, that there's a little button there on the end, and I'd like to file that off and smooth that out, round it off a little bit. I'll take it to a sander now, but I think I'm going to put a little screw on the end of this to help hold on to it, and then I can put it on a sander and round that end off. I was having trouble with my camera in the other room, and it cut off on me and wouldn't come back on. And I don't know what happened, but anyway, I don't know how much footage we got on that. But there you go. There's a nicely polished up knob. It really looks nice and professional. Now let's see how well it goes on here. Oh, by the way, I also flattened off the end of another 832 tap. I have quite a few of these 832 taps. I flattened one off so that it would go up in there further and cut the threads further up in there. I'm hoping that'll help it bottom out. It didn't quite bottom out the last time. Let's see if it does now. Okay, so let's see what she looks like going on there. It's a pretty looking knob. Yeah, it's just a fraction of a hair from going all the way to the bottom. Actually, it may be bottomed out. Well, it's not quite. No, it's not. But it's so close, nobody will really care. It's so nice. And it goes on there really nice and tight. And as you can see, it works great. It just looks real nice. I think it looks real good with the other gold knobs that are on the guitar. I think you can see, it just seems to match really nice. So I hope the customer will like that. Because this guitar has no other visible signs of damage other than right around here, I decided to go ahead and sand this down and clean it up and try to make it, look pretty, consistent with the rest of the finish. The rest of the finish is pretty decent. There's very little scratches anywhere. I didn't want to leave this big line here, even though you really can't hardly feel it. I mean, it's pretty much gone. I just thought, well, it'd be a good chance to go ahead and clean this up a little bit, fill it in a little bit, put a little lacquer over it, buff it out, and then you really won't hardly be able to tell it at all unless you look really close. But I didn't count on this big dent right here, so we've got I don't know what that came from, but it's pretty good gouge there. And so I'm going to try to fill that with a little CA glue because it's pretty deep really. And we'll try to fill that a little bit, and then there is just a teeny bit of fill around here that we'll just try to fill in with the CA glue because the lacquer just sucks into those places and it just never fills. I think that'll do for now. We'll let that set up and get hard. I know it works for everybody else, but there are some things in this world that do not work for me. They work for everybody else. And one of them is letting super glue dry on its own, CA glue. I know everybody else puts it on there and it dries instantly, and within 15 minutes it's totally dry. I've let this dry for nearly, I would say about 45 minutes, and it's still wet. When I start scraping it, it's still wet underneath there. And it's so aggravating. So that's why you always see me use Accelerator. It just doesn't dry for me. And I've tried different brands, so don't start telling me I need this brand or that brand. I've tried gazillions of brands. And it just is the way it is with me. And another thing that doesn't work for me, that works for everybody else, is gravity. I know. You're thinking, yeah, how could it not work? It just doesn't. I can turn something over and nothing will fall out, like, a paper bag. It just sits there, and it's like, okay, fine. It's just the way it is, guys. Can't help it. Just thought you'd like to know that. There are just some things in this world that do not work for me. Now that it's all exposed, I'm going to spritz it with this and hoping that it will harden it up. I think the gaps are actually filled. It's just that it needs to get hard. Well, we'll give that a little time to get hard and see what happens. And let me just clarify something I said earlier about the super glue never drying, CA glue never drying. Whenever I have a situation where I need to adjust something and, need it to not set up instantly, it always sets up instantly. Instantly. Like you can't move the part at all. So, that's my super glue, CA glue dilemma. It's my glue cross to bear. Glue Cross, that sounds like an insurance company. That's my sad story. I don't know if that accomplished anything or not because it doesn't look like the holes are filled. Yeah, some of them are. Time is money on this deal, so I often, whenever I've wet sanded something, I often take like this thing here. It's just, I've got it set like a blow dryer. It's not hot. It's just good and warm. And I like to dry the lacquer real good, the area that I'm going to lacquer real good, so that it won't cloud up. I think that should be good enough. Now we'll spray a little aerosol lacquer on there. I put about 3 coats of lacquer on this now, and it was turning milky white because it's a very humid, rainy day here. So I just took the heat gun, turned it on very low heat, and just went over it like this, back and forth, and it took all the white right out of there, and it dried to touch really well. It's already dried to touch, and it's just been about 10 minutes. Not even that long, really. But anyway, that's what I do whenever I see the milky stuff coming. Now, I do have a retarder that I put in my normal spray lacquer, but because I'm using a rattle can, that doesn't work real well. Anyway, this works real good for this type of approach. And of course, the shop is air conditioned, so that helps dry the air a little bit too. If you just did this in a humid open garage and on a humid day, you would never get a satisfactory result at all. It's been a couple days and this has been sitting drying, and to be perfectly honest with you, I'm disappointed because it just didn't hide the break enough. You can't hardly feel it at all. I mean, it's like it's just not even there as far as the feel goes. But it just, you can still see it much better than I expected you could see it. Anyway, it just, sometimes it's just the way it goes, you know. Lacquer goes on so thin, it's just hard to cover up something with a clear lacquer and make it not show, you know. But did the best I could, and it won't cost the guy a lot of money, so that's the plus side. And it's really strong. It's not going to break. I'm not worried about that part. Anyway, I'm just cleaning up the overspray on the lacquer now, and then I'm going to buff this out and call it good, because I just don't feel like I'm improving it any further than what we've got right here. I think that's as good as it's going to get, so we're going to the buffing wheel now. We'll buff this out and get this thing strung back up and see what it sounds like. I just buffed out the peg head there with the semi-chrome polish to make it look shiny. I was hoping it might get rid of some of the crease there where it creased it across there, but you know, you can still see it, and it's just not going to get better, I don't think. So it just is what it is. I'm going to now just use the semi-chrome on the back here. Even though I think the back's buffed out pretty well, I think we can maybe just help it a little bit more. Several of these ferrules are just crazy tight, so I got them started in as straight as I could, and then I'm just using the clamp here to press them into place. The clamp has leather on both sides, so you know it should do a pretty good job without creating a problem. And they're just too hard to press in by hand. The frets on this are pretty good. I don't see much point in doing a fret job, although it may prove different when we string it up. But right now I'm going to say just forget the fret job deal and just put strings on it, see where it's at. Well, friends, I'm sorry to tell you that the ending on this particular video on repairing the neck on this Gibson guitar, and take a close look, you can see it, but I promise you, you cannot feel it. Anyway, I just want to let you know it's going to be a bit anticlimactic because the electronics don't work. I guess I talked to the customer about it, and the story is that apparently he must have, in the middle of the night, got his foot wrapped around the cord here and tripped over it, and that's what pulled it off the stand and broke the neck. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, apparently that must have caused some sort of a short in the jack here or somewhere else, and it's caused the electronics not to work. He wants to fix that himself. I said, well, I can probably take it apart and figure it out and fix it, you know. I'm not an expert on the electronics of guitars. I'll be honest with you, I just don't know that much about them. I'm not afraid to get into them. I have taken them apart, completely disassembled them and put them back, and I've done all that, so I know how to do all that. And I can solder really well, so that's not an issue. But the customer just doesn't really want me to do it because he doesn't really want to pay to have me do it. And, you know, and I don't blame him, because if you can do it yourself, why not? You know, and he wants to do it himself, so no big deal. But anyway, it's a beautiful Les Paul guitar, back in perfectly playable condition. I wish that would have been a little less noticeable, but like I said, you literally cannot feel it. It's not there. It's just disappeared. And I really do like my little custom knob there. I hope you guys like that. So I think he'll like that too. Thanks for watching.